Jodie Foster in a psychological thriller? Yes, please. A Private Life is kind of art house, a tiny bit pretentious, and French. So what do you think? Renowned psychiatrist Lilian Steiner mounts a private investigation into the death of one of her patients, whom she is convinced has been murdered. So right from the start, the movie gives off vibes of a thriller that you would have seen in the late 60s and 70s. There are a lot of over-the-shoulder shots, mysterious filming angles, some vague intentions, and an oppressive yet intriguing tone to the storytelling. Now, the setup for this is simple, although it's not spelled out simply in the beginning. Foster plays a psychiatrist who has been treating a patient for many years, only to find out one day that the patient has died suddenly. Now, as Foster searches her memory and then session recordings, she becomes convinced that the death was murder, and that the clues lie somewhere in her sessions. Jodie Foster is difficult to warm up to in this role. For the intro of the movie and to the character, we see a frazzled and impatiently grumpy psychiatrist, someone who's not comfortable in her own surroundings and then antagonistic to those around her. She seems agitated and distressed, but the reasoning is ill-defined, having us meet a character mid-frustration or mid-panic attack. And her bedside manner feels like it has less to do with boundaries and more with disdain, like she resents her patients, or at the very least, doesn't like treating them. This also makes it seem a bit strange when she finds out the fate of her patient. Now, Foster's a bit of an unreliable narrator, just thanks to certain visions that we witness her experience. But she's also still determined and driven, despite the only thing she has to go on is a hunch. And this also leads to some frustrating and even useless complexities that are included within the story. We're taken along a path that isn't based on anything other than speculation and gut feeling. And she can also be her own worst enemy throughout the story. Thanks to some impatience and rash decisions, she jumps into a situation that she has zero context for, or maybe even attends something that she's not invited to, which then leads to run-ins with law enforcement or interactions with antagonistic people that she deems as suspects. Now, for this slow-burning thriller, nothing happens quickly, other than a few sequences that feel as though we've skipped a bit through time. Now, the patience, it does make for a slower feeling, but there's still this building intensity as it appears Foster gets closer to a revelation. Now, the context for many of the relationships in her life, it's a bit obscured and not expressly described. This adds to the mystique in portions, but not in areas that are really necessary to the central issue. We spend useless time trying to figure out how Foster is connected to characters, which then much later lines of dialogue will inform. But that artificial mystery just didn't enhance the tale. Some sequences also create a choppy watching experience. Foster will bounce around from location to location on a whim. Now, part of this is just a natural result of how the character is built. But because we're not totally in her head, we only gain insight through her conversations. So if Foster doesn't expressly say something, the motive for an action isn't clear. And there are a few of these that pop up throughout the movie. Matthew Almerich does an excellent job at crafting a persona who is sketchy and potentially untrustworthy. Now, his behaviors do make sense, especially in relation to Foster's impositions, but there comes a point when a dynamic shift creates responses that don't fully make sense in a logical sense. And I love the intensity that he brings to his scenes, which instantly then put me on edge. Daniel Auteuil, and I'm sure I mispronounced that, he plays Foster's ex-husband. Now, he's a kind of lovable, squishy guy in terms of personality. He knows how to push some of her buttons, but more often than not, he's a compassionate partner and then a patient influence. I particularly enjoyed the character when he was out of his element, forced to ad-lib in situations he was clearly uncomfortable being placed in. He becomes bumbling and stammering, which really should tip off another character that something is up, but because he has this softness in his eyes and then a quiet demeanor, they don't suspect anything, even when he's abruptly strange. Now, there is a kissing scene between Foster and Auteuil, and they're in an elevator or some kind of small space. It's kind of off-putting to watch because the focus on mouth movements, it was awkward. Just open mouth slurping and gnawing rather than anything that looked romantic or sensual. Then there was the almost violent pawing of body parts. Now, I'm not sure what emotion this was intended to evoke, but unless it was a bit of disgust, the scene missed the mark. Now, the idea of the psyche and memories, it's a huge element within the story. And to help spur this on, a hypnotist is introduced into the narrative. And during some of the scenes, the film becomes odd, even a little artsy and pompous. The ideas are bold with some visual devices that turn the story on its head. But for all the beauty and intrigue that's created, it also comes across as a bit of an impotent tease. The concept is dynamic, but it also threatens to alter the genre of the film, ultimately playing a role in it, but not in the way that we would expect at all. And I know that's a vague bunch of words, but because this encompasses a hefty chunk of the plot and then the storytelling, I don't want to give any specifics away. Now, while the movie is an hour 43, there are times when it felt shorter than this. And then there's also times where it felt longer, which is a weird dynamic. Filmmaking, it's beautiful, incorporating Hitchcockian camera shots, a slow-burning pace, and then characters that are obscured in motive and virtue. Foster wonderfully captures the balance of a character who's potentially breaking down and then so self-assured that nothing can dissuade her. With palpable tension, the narrative promises mysterious intrigue, but when all is said and done, the twisted reveal ultimately lets us down, with a feeling of a bait-and-switch maneuver. This doesn't fully ruin all that preceded it, but it does affect a lasting impression. There's a little sex and nudity, some profanity, and a bit of violence. I give A Private Life 3 out of 5 couches. This was engaging, just a little bit of a bummer on the ending. So what are some old school thrillers or mysteries that you've seen that are awesome? I would love to hear about them in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.